So one of the things that really stuck out when I was, doing a little bit of research was you have this like extensive experience at Glassdoor, which I remember in the last 15 years I've spent mostly in sales and sales leadership roles, and then for like 2 or 3 years I dabbled in marketing.
Okay.
So so we got interested because the company I was working with, from a recruiting standpoint, they wanted to really leverage Glassdoor and all of
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. And that was my experience, was being able to sign up myself as a marketing leader and set things up and do all this other kind of things. And then Glassdoor kind of explodes.
Right.
And I think that was a big part of your role. Correct
Oh,
me
yeah.
if I'm wrong, was how do we go from product led to sales led growth, which seems to be like kind of the hot theme right now. But do you want to share a little bit more? I think you were one of the first sales hires, right, at Glassdoor. Like, kind of run us through what was that like, and helping with the growth and all those kind of things.
Yeah, I would love to. And it was just such an incredible journey that yeah, it was pretty transformative for my career. So I was fortunate enough to start at Glassdoor as the 10th sales hire and the
Yeah.
38th employee overall. The company was doing less than, 15 million of ARR at that time. And it was, the interesting thing, it wasn't as much product led trying to become sales led. It was a B2C organization so focused on
Oh,
the candidate and the consumer that we
mm,
were trying to build out that B2B value proposition. We know we have all these job seekers here. We know we have these candidates here, but how do we get employers to care, want to be a part of the conversation, and ultimately spend money with us? But the parallel to the PLG, SLG, world that we are more familiar with now, I think is actually a really strong one, because the virality of a product led growth business, like I have the very good benefit of experiencing at Calendly, you have all these pro users, you have all these
yep.
people who love the product and are coming to use it. And the challenge is now, how do we get businesses and enterprises to think about scheduling and automation more broadly? So there's definitely parallel between Glassdoor and Calendly, and really interesting and unique learnings from both that I'm excited to chat with you about.
Yeah. What was it like at Glassdoor? When were you a part of the initial conversations where you had to think about just messaging and value prop for a business? Like, what was that process like? Because I'm just thinking of all the different components that go into like the go to market motion, and it's
Yeah.
not just sales, obviously, right? I mean, there's a lot of collaboration across departments, but what was that like? And is there any kind of learnings maybe that you took with you into
Yeah.
Calendly?
It was a ton of fun, and I will always say, and I still feel to this day, having moved on from Glassdoor, the value proposition there was just one of the absolute best you could find as a seller, because it would be the conversation that a CEO would take your call for.
Yeah.
Members of the executive team would take your call, because the moment you tell them that he or she, or their broader business is being rated and reviewed, and people are commenting on the work culture and the experience that they're building, those people want to talk.
Yeah.
So the hook to get those conversations was actually just a ton of fun. And in those early days, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember we would stay, Friday into the evening. We would collect all the CEO direct lines that we could get, whether it be cell phone, whether it be direct line at a desk, and we would call the CEOs after 5 o'clock their time, because
Yeah.
if they have an EA or somebody who's helping managing their
Yeah.
time, they've probably gone home. And so we would call the CEOs, and there's only a small group of us. We're kind of in a fishbowl, and we would get on the phone and say, "Do you know you've got a 2.8 rating on Glassdoor?" And they would say, "What? What is Glassdoor? And where does this rating come from?" And it was a really fun and exciting time to, yeah, help shape that value story. And of course, it evolved, right? I mean, Glassdoor really was the category creator of this idea of employee engagement and the importance of
Mhm.
employer brand. I mean, when I started, you did not have teams focused around this concept of either of those topics, employee engagement or employer brand. So it was so incredible to be a part of that whole market shift, that now, because of
Yeah.
Glassdoor, companies would say, "You know what? We just hired somebody. to help us figure out this strategy. We just hired somebody who's responsible for our employer brand and thinking about our employee engagement. So, yes to being a part of those early, value stories, and it just was such a fun and incredible, value proposition to say. So to your question of what have I learned from that, I think make it really relevant to deciding to come to Calendly, which was, why is this a must have solution for whoever the economic buyer is, depending upon the ICP. And one of the things I've loved about Calendly is there are a lot of buyers for this product because there are so many use cases for
Yep.
Calendly. You have revenue leaders who care about lead flow and lead conversion. You have recruiting teams who care about time to fill and an incredible seamless customer candidate experience. You have, customer experience. Like it touches just almost every industry and every sector. And for me, that was a really compelling, again, hook to everybody cares about, efficiency and time maximization and productivity. And it's been really fun since I've been here over the last year and a half to help elevate that conversation beyond just a one-to-one meeting, because that, it's just so much more than that, and it's really fun to be out there kind of
Yeah.
galvanizing that story.
Yeah, let's unpack this PLG part first.
Yeah.
Um, so if you were to kind of quickly outline the parts of this that are really important, like for example, you had mentioned partnerships. There's a messaging component to this that sounds like it's really important. And then I'm sure there's another, like the actual motion of running more of this sales led. How do we go to, that's everything from the cadence to reasons why we decide to reach out to people, what a good fit looks like, et cetera. Like, what's kind of the broad brushstrokes of going from PLG to sales led growth?
Yeah, well, I've learned a lot about that since coming here, and I think the things that stand out the most is one, if you're a product-led growth business, the really good fortune that you have means that your product itself is incredibly viral,
Yeah.
and that without having people like me and my team intentionally focused and hired for the purpose of, increasing market share, the product itself is going to have more and more people sign up and use it. Calendly being a great example. I say, hey, Jason, I'd love to get time with you. Feel free to click on my link and pick a time that works from you. You
Yeah.
do that, you love that experience, and then you go sign up because you've got to set a meeting, with someone else, and now you're going to use it. So I think that when you decide that the virality of the product isn't on its own enough from a growth strategy any longer, you have to also decide what would the differentiator be between Jason going and signing up on his own for yourself and, somebody thinking about this more broadly as part of kind of their overall technology ecosystem. And why are those things different, and how do we make them different if on their own at this moment they're not. And so that's where a lot of that kind of motion comes in, right? And I think at Calendly, and depending upon, if there are any PLG leaders here thinking about that sales led motion, why would somebody who runs a team, somebody who runs an organization, somebody who runs an entire business or a company care about overseeing this purchase themselves versus just letting their employees go do it on their own? Canva is a great example of this. I know Scribe is another. There are a ton of examples of where employees can just go do this on their own. And
Yeah.
so, aside from just data security and compliance, which certainly can be an inroad, but usually you still need a business owner and a business champion to say, this matters enough team wide, department wide, company wide, that we're not going to kind of tolerate or accept our employees one off doing this on their own. And this needs to be built in as part of our overall strategy. So the broad stroke motion is, how do you answer that question?
Yeah.
Why is your product a necessity, a must have in that technology landscape? And why do you need a business owner versus individuals just deciding, "Hey, these are the tools I like, and therefore these are the tools I'm gonna use."
Wow, okay, there's so much that we could unpack
Mhm.
there.
Yeah,
So,
keep going.
are
Yeah.
you yeah, are you able to share how that kinda came together for Calendly? Because one thing I'm super curious about is, I'm a Calendly user and I've used lots of scheduling links and all that kinda stuff, and when I work with either account executives or SDRs, it's a lot of the times it's SDRs because they haven't sold the thing before, so they're not quite sure what the business value is. They're just trying to get a meeting. They have trouble, I call it chunking up, kind of like chunking up features and functions to like business priorities and like problems that get in the way of that. Are you able to share at all what that journey has been like for Calendly? I'm just curious how you positioned a scheduling tool to an executive who probably just is like, "Okay, cool, it's a scheduling tool," but I didn't know that there was a component of this that could massively increase conversions through our sales pipeline
Yeah,
at the click of a button. I
right.
didn't realize how much waste there was going back and forth with our team scheduling meetings with people. I didn't realize that part of our attrition problem, and I'm just riffing here, like part of our attrition
Oh, you're
problem.
riffing wonderfully. This is
Yeah.
all exactly it. Yeah.
So how do you yeah, what was that journey like? I'm just curious because there's probably I imagine you guys probably didn't hit it out of the park the very first time you put this together and tried. I'm sure there were some learnings, but what's that journey been like for you guys?
Yeah, and of course we're still very much on it, right? I mean, I think any company in tech and in software and just what generative AI has done even in the last 6 to 12 months, like we're constantly evolving and learning, and I think that's what makes these roles so fun.
Mhm.
And I also was not, the creator of this initial messaging at Calendly, unlike when I joined Glassdoor. Calendly as, as an overall business is far more mature and kind of along its journey, but I can share the learnings since the time that I have been here, which is really kind of you nailed it, Jason, in this idea of how are we leading with value and business impact? Because talking
Yeah.
about a one-to-one scheduling tool really doesn't capture either of those. You could say, oh, that is a couple less emails, cool, or sure that saves me some time, okay, but you're not really painting the picture around business impact and like transformative business production and efficiency. And so those are the style conversations that we have to have and that we, have daily. So to your example, which I love because revenue leaders, sales leaders, demand gen leaders, RevOps leaders love Calendly, and our messaging to them is about those business metrics they care about: lead conversion, you know um, time to lead response, or kind of speed to lead, so to speak. How many of the leads that hit your website actually get to connect with, whether it's a salesperson, whether it's an account manager, whether it's a member of your support team. Those are the metrics that those revenue leaders care about. And I'll just give the other example again: in recruiting, your head of recruiting wants to be very confident that you are putting out a world class candidate experience, that the whole entire journey, thinking of the employer brand, is
Yeah.
white glove and really special. And when you can show them that leveraging Calendly and thinking about the round robin functionality, so the technology is going to put you in front of the soonest available hiring manager or salesperson or SDR, and thus increase your speed to lead or improve your candidate experience. You're now having a conversation that's about business impact, and you
Yeah.
have their attention. And so I really encourage any sales leader or any seller in a PLG organization trying to create, kind of carve out this path for sales led. Sales led to me has to be directly connected to value and business impact. Because if you
Yep.
and your sellers and your sales organization aren't producing and driving more value, well, guess what? You've got a self serve product and they can go do it on their own without you. Right. So your involvement has to be really anchored in value and impact.
What do you think is, in your experience, missing with even companies that aren't PLG going to more sales-led growth. I see this just in sales-led growth companies in general, where there seems to be a really big disconnect in how they communicate with executive buyers.
Mm,
It's hard to point the finger at the rep, and it's like I'm also of the belief that, hey, as a rep, you have to own your development, and
sure.
sure, but
Right.
there seems to be a lack of enablement or training around how to speak about your product to the executive, just like you did there, where it's like, yeah, what a rep is oftentimes very tempted to do is to say things like to an executive, "Hey, Molly, Calendly makes scheduling way easier at the click of a button. You'll be able to miss out on less appointments in your sales team, et cetera, et cetera." And they don't really talk to what that executive might care about. That, like you said, is value and business impact. What do you think is missing? I guess
Yeah.
in that, and like, what job is it from leadership and enablement to kind of teach that part of why would an executive care
Yeah.
about this?
Gosh, I love this question, and I swear I could spend days and days on the answer to this question. And it's exactly why I love sales so much because one, I think that when you really break down what is the role of a salesperson, it is to help somebody make a decision that otherwise they maybe would not have made, or solve a problem that they may not even be aware is having as large of an impact on them as possible. It's just like the crux of human persuasion. But I also think that the problem why sellers aren't doing this well enough today is because it's like the age old faux pas of making it about us and not them, right? And so I think when you have an executive in front of you and you are just like ready to sell your product and you're ready to close the biggest deal of your life, you inexperienced or not trained sellers will just go and make it about them instead of one really earning the right and building credibility with this executive, economic buyer as to you understand a little bit about a day in the life. You certainly, don't hold their role verbatim, but you work with and speak with a lot of people who do. And so you
Yeah,
have to come with just like this credibility, earning the right moment. And you don't make it all about them, about yourself, excuse me. You really have to show that genuine, authentic desire to know the challenges they're having in their business and prove that you have experience in a body of work solving them for others who are like them. And when you do that, that's when it's like, oh my gosh, the light in the tunnel shines through, and all of a sudden you're having a business conversation, not
yeah,
just selling your product. And I really think the best salespeople I know and I've come across are just absolute experts at building that trust, building that credibility, and not because they're being coached to do so, because actually intrinsically that is how they're wired.
yeah,
I just said this to my team the other day. When you there's obviously many stereotypes about salespeople and who we are and who we're not. But people will say if you're somebody who's able to negotiate and get your way, they're kind of like, oh, you should be in sales. You just got what you wanted, and
yeah,
that can be true to a degree. But my view, actually, to see who really could have a career in sales is those people that when you meet them for the first time, you just like feel so disarmed, and you tell them your whole life story, and you're like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, how did I just tell you all of that? What just happened? And it's like, well, that person made you feel safe. They made you feel, like you could
yeah,
trust them, and you wanted to open up to them, and you wanted to share. So when I'm looking to hire and thinking about the type of talent I want on my team, I of course want strong negotiators and all that, but the intrinsic skill is just a genuine, authentic, curious person who loves to learn and loves to solve problems.
yeah. I love that. There's this book. My wife Sarah, actually, I would joke about. She prescribed it as homework for me to read. It's called "You're Not Listening" by Kate
Yep, yep.
Murphy. Okay, so you're aware of the book, but Kate
Yes.
Murphy talks about this concept of shift versus support. And it's
Mm,
very interesting. It's this, when people share things is our natural inclination for most people in conversations is to shift the focus of the conversation onto ourselves. So you ask someone how their weekend was, they say they went out and did a barbecue with their friends. You start thinking about, do I like barbecue? If I had a barbecue, what would I serve? You start thinking about all of these things
Right,
versus leaning in and supporting and
right.
showing genuine interest. And I don't know about you, just in my everyday life, it's so refreshing when someone shows genuine interest in
Oh,
you.
yeah.
And I love that. Like getting prospects to open up. Like those are the
Yeah,
people 100% I've seen in my career too that are very good at this. And especially showing an executive the value and the impact. That's sort of the trust building part of speaking
yeah,
to an executive is the proof point of, hey, I've been here, I've seen your situation, we've helped a couple other people with it. Let me articulate that to you and sort of
yeah.
build that buy-in. Um, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the other thing too, I think what we're seeing right now as we close out 2023 and we're going into 24 here is a very big, call it resurgence or, renewed reliance on outbounding in sales. And, we could
Yeah.
talk about that a ton too. But this is so important as I think of an outbounding motion and muscle generally. We know that 63% of sales teams have said their inbound volume has decreased and they are needing to really rely on this outbound muscle again,
Yep.
either more than ever or, more to pre-pandemic rates. And this is, I think, such an important thing to remember in your outbounding efforts. Your immediate goal is to not sell your product in your email. Your immediate goal is to earn the right to a conversation with that person, because the truth is you don't know if your product is the right fit for them or not. Of course, you have the conviction and the belief that it is, and you want it to be. But I think in our outbounding efforts and messages, we have to keep this perspective of don't just go sell and talk about yourself.
Yep.
Earn the right to that conversation and the chance to learn more and to, together agree. Does it make sense to continue a dialogue?
Totally. Yeah, I always say don't prospect to make a sale, prospect to start a conversation. Like you're not going to
Exactly.
sell anything to someone over the phone or through an email, nor they're going to be trust you enough to buy it. But start the conversations. So let's talk about outbound. Um,
Let's
okay, so
Where to
I'm
start?
ass- I'm assuming that. Correct me if I'm wrong. With Calendly, there probably wasn't prior to you guys moving up market, a strong culture of outbound because you're getting like hammered with inbound and so many people just signing up. So, and this is, I have so many organizations coming to me for help. A lot of it's account executives too, where it's like, hey, we've decided we're not going to probably do any more hiring this year and we need account
Mm,
executives to self source more. And it's like, where do you start? It's not even a part of their culture to do
right.
outbound. One of the companies I was working with, they even told their reps earlier this year they would never have to do outbound because
Oh,
prospects don't like it. You know what I mean? It's like that's what they're starting from.
right.
So when you think about the culture, like the massive culture shift that requires,
Yeah.
do you have any pointers for sales leaders that they're in a situation where this has been definitely one of those years where we got to do outbound?
Yeah.
And now I'm going to be asking my team to do something that, a lot of these AEs haven't done for years,
Right.
right? So, how do you suggest that we get started from just a buy-in and a culture standpoint around where the organization is heading and how to communicate that with your org and
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So one, I think, of course, it does start at the moment of kind of like hiring and team selection. So you do always want to be hiring for that grit, that gumption, that bravado, that hunger, people who want to be in the driver's seat of their success. So I do think that it is possible. You may have a team of people today, if they've never done this before, and if they don't have this body of work or this evidence and other examples of their life where they have chosen to be in command and control of their own success, you really have to consider, do you have the right people on the bus to do
Yeah.
this work? Because it is different. It really is different work. I am very drawn to people who are intrinsically motivated, self-starters, super gritty, want to be the person relied on when the stakes are at its highest. And so I think if you
Mhm.
want to start with a team of people who really embody that individually and then collectively, you're gonna be able to stand up this outbound motion. So that's kind of first and foremost. I think you've got to make sure you have the right people with the right skill set and toolkit to be successful here. And then if you don't, and you start to assess, what are the options, right? If outbound is a critical must-have component for your sales and go-to-market strategy, which I think it should be and is, even if you're a product-led growth business, you've got to make sure that you've got those people. So that's kind of first and foremost. Then, assuming you've got the right people and you know that they have what it takes, and they kind of have that like fire in their belly, then you make it as fun and kind of team oriented and collaborative as possible. So you need to give them the right place to start, and backed in data and conviction. So let's look at our kind of our win reports, and let's see, this is the ICP that we're doing the best, or
Yep.
this is the group of either personas or level in an organization where we are having the most success. So let's start with this baseline of, we're going to give all of us the best chance possible to succeed. And then the reality of like, well, what does success look like? And it is not necessarily that we are expecting one call closes. That's probably pretty unlikely. But what we're going to celebrate is, did you get a meeting booked? Did you get an email response? Did you
Yeah.
get to, one step closer to that conversation? Because I think if you put the goal stick at the very, very end of the sales cycle, then yeah, even the most motivated and hungry people are going to start to feel defeat if success is a closed run opportunity. And by the way, you've got an 8 to 12 month sales cycle, right? So
Yeah.
you've got to focus on the process and the wins along the way. And to the point of making it collaborative, making it fun, create team spiffs around this, make sure your recognition is consistent and high in a remote environment, which both of my last two organizations have been fully remote. Obviously, one post pandemic, and Calendly, the whole entire team is remote. It is harder to build that sales culture and that sales energy when you're not all on the floor together, but it's not impossible. So your leaders have got to be bought in. You have to have kind of like cultural stakeholders who are high-fiving people on Slack and doing all
Yeah.
the things that are harder when you're not sitting in an office together.
What advice would you give to a sales executive that's a little worried that this might affect morale, or it might lead to attrition, or it might lead to a situation where they have to let go of a bunch of people, and that's kind of the fear and hesitance around being a little more formal about rolling this out versus telling all the directors, and then they bring it down to the managers. It's like, "Oh, by the
Right.
way, we're gonna," versus it being like, "This is what we're doing as a sales work. This is what we care most about right now." What advice would you give a sales executive? It's a little apprehensive because they have a lot of people that they know are gonna be resistant, that are not gonna wanna do this, which I'm
Yeah.
seeing quite a bit of right now.
Yep, yep. Well, I think you have to, any good sales executive, sales leader has to be a wonderful and powerful storyteller, and should be
Yeah,
able to influence how people feel. So, a lot of what I view my job to be is to inspire and rally the team in low moments, to do hard things, and to commit to locking arms, and doing so for the betterment of the business, but also most importantly the betterment of the customer, because when the customer is winning, the business is winning and the team is winning.
yeah,
So I think that you first and foremost have to look yourself in the mirror and say, do I have the conviction that this is a must have part of our toolkit to be success? Because
mhm,
you've got to have it first. And then in a lot of ways, I think you kind of have to go first. So thinking about ways that you're creating a really kind of transparent and authentic culture where the team's asking you hard questions on all hands on the fly.
yeah,
You're showing an ability to think on your feet. You're showing the ability to kind of be vulnerable and a little
mm,
unsure, but charging through because you've got the belief in the broader team and what you're all building. So I think a lot of it is how you lead versus what you're asking the team to do. But of
Mm,
course, the what matters as well. And so I think you also are going to have the really, really strong benefit of just some proof points and evidence, right? Like, do you have somebody in your group or in your team who is doing this first or doing this best, and they're at the top of the leaderboard, and they're the ones that are just having all this success, and we're looking and saying, what is she doing? How can we mirror that? Well, cool, we can mirror it. Here's how, but it's going to take hard work. It's going to take a bunch of conviction and kind of stretching ourselves, but that's the team we are. We're a team that stretches ourselves and pushes ourselves. So it's not easy, but if you get in front of your team and you're apprehensive and you're unsure, they're going to be apprehensive and unsure. So you got to
yeah,
be all in, and you've got to lead, from the front with a bunch of conviction that it's the
yeah,
path to success.
yeah, I love that. Do I believe it? The other thing you mentioned I thought was really cool, cultural stakeholders. I
Mm.
always talk about how when you're selling internally, it's the same as selling a deal. There's so many similarities. You would never sell without champions. Like, people on your side. You would never sell by just telling people what to do. You would share a customer story.
Yes.
So sharing stories of other reps having success with the rep, highlighting those people. It's just there's so many big parts to that. I love that. So you said collaborative. That's something I'm really big on. I find that reps are so much more willing to participate in a process that if they feel like they got a hand in creating.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
like, a lot of what we'll do when I work with the team for the first time is we'll do a messaging workshop, and we'll essentially take their best reps and sales leaders and people from marketing, anyone that's going to have input on messaging, which I think a big mistake is letting marketing create the sequencing messaging for the sales team. I think it's got to be collaborative. Like, everyone's got to participate in it. But now it's like the reps are more bought in because they feel like they had their input. And why wouldn't you want input from reps that are seeing success with it? Like, that's the people that you want to really emulate.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love that collaborative piece. Is there any other tips that you have around you said fun, team oriented? You almost make Outbound sound like this awesome. I love
Right?
Outbound. A lot of people don't, but fun, team oriented. Anything else that you do to just it's such a monotonous activity most of the time. Is there anything else that you do to make it fun or that you encourage leaders to do?
Well, I think that there are absolutely kind of techniques and tactics within your outbound messaging and the style of your messaging that can make it more fun and less monotonous for your team. So, kind of using like an omni-channel approach where your team is leveraging video tools like a Loom or a Vidyard or a Veed to actually not just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Jason, it's Molly at Calendly," da 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 robotic, but where you're
Yeah,
actually creating this opportunity for more personal connection in a video style. I love what people are doing for personalization and
yeah,
really making it as yeah, like fun and unique to the recipient as possible. And now, granted, this takes time, and there are really cool AI tools that can help with this. SalesLoft has some, Reggie AI has some. I know Outreach has some, but where it's very personal to who you're going to send this to. So, for me, I have people send me the most creative stuff, mentioning the University of Florida and the Gators because I am a Gator,
yeah,
mentioning my love for baking because I love to bake, mentioning, things that I can just tell they've really gone the extra mile. And I think that your sales team can have some fun doing that stuff. We have a
yeah,
channel where we have a Slack channel internally where the team drops their templates of like the most personalized and how
mm,
cool was this, and they're using song lyrics, or if the person they're reaching out to is an athlete, they're talking about stats, and we just try to really celebrate and make that fun. That, again, we're not waiting for a closed deal for recognition. We're celebrating the process along the way, which is, hey, if this is what we have to do in order to build pipeline, and we got to build pipeline to close deals, well, let's have fun while we do it.
yeah. Love it. There's so many good ideas that you dropped in there. Even just something as simple as a Slack channel where and this has to come from top down, like, chief
Yes, yeah,
revenue officer down should be celebrating these wins and, like, be in
totally.
that channel engaging. It helps so much.
Yeah,
Um,
and sharing, and by the way, sharing the templates or the emails that we received or the LinkedIn in-mails
Yeah.
that we receive that get our attention.
Mhm.
And, I think the
Yeah.
team also gets pretty excited about that because they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go try that now."
Mhm.
Um, I think the other thing too, this just kind of goes back to talent and do you have the right people? And I know you were saying this in jest, like you kind of make outbounding sound like it would be fun. And I genuinely think if you have the right people on your team, that it can be.
Yeah.
It really can be. If it is a box check that I've got to hit my 50 dials, I've got to hit my 50 activities, and I'm just going through the motion, yeah, you're just going through the motion, and that's not really fun. But if
Yeah.
you choose and you understand this is a critical component to my success, and it's one that I can make my own, that I can, create a lot of kind of individualism around, then why would it not be fun?
Yeah, and I think that you can create an environment, that feels more like going to Orange Theory
Yeah.
versus a boot
Yeah,
camp,
yeah,
where it's like, "Hey, we can, like, work really hard and get a lot of shit done, but also do it in a team environment, and we can grind together," kinda thing. Um,
totally. Yeah, and one just last note, I'm by no
yeah.
means preaching toxic positivity. I'm not here, saying that, "Oh my gosh, this is just the best part of sales." I just,
Yeah.
if you run and show up and kinda lead your team with that just fire and inspiration and excitement,
Mhm.
they're gonna feel it, and then it
Yeah.
spreads.
No, totally, 100%. As we move into our last topic of, like, AI and automation, I have to ask you,
Yeah,
what impact do you think AI and automation is gonna have on outbound? Like, what do you see outbound being in, like, 3 to 5 years? It's hard to even think. Outreach is, I think, about a decade old. It hasn't even, like, sales engagement tools. I remember the first one I used was Tout app. That
yeah,
was in, I wanna say 2015 maybe, and you couldn't even thread a follow-up email automated. You had to
yeah,
manually send it still. That's, like, only 7 or 8 years ago, So, I can't even
yep,
imagine what 5 years is gonna do, but what do you see the future of outbound being and the role of, like, AI and automation with
yeah.
outbound?
It's a really good and thoughtful question. I think it is going to continue to evolve and continue to shape, the industry as we're already seeing in, again, not a huge amount of time if we think about really like OpenAI and
Mhm.
ChatGPT coming on um, to the forefront. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's already a bunch of tools out there to help write your email messages, your LinkedIn outreach, right? And I mean, we're already seeing those being heavily leveraged. So to the degree that, that could entirely replace the need for a human to sit down and write the email, maybe, but I think we're also at the part of the journey of AI where you still really want to check and kind of verify, and so leverage it to help time save to the extent that it can. But I don't think it is a full human replacement, certainly at this point. Now, what I do love about AI and automation, and where I do think sales leaders should just go all in, is on productivity metrics and taking those non revenue generating tasks off your sellers' plates to
Yeah.
give them more time to have conversations with executives and your buyers, and be using their skills as humans and not technology. So I mean, I just think that there's so many game changing ways to think about AI and automation, and of course am biased because Calendly, this is really kind of at the forefront of what we're doing, which is why would you waste time on scheduling not only a one-to-one meeting, but a meeting with multiple people, getting leads to the right seller, getting support tickets to the right support team member. You should be leveraging technology to do all of that for you. And yes, it's going to save time, but connected back to that true value story, time has to equal other things, right? So
Yep.
time equals revenue because your sellers have more time, to be in conversations with economic buyers
Mhm.
and conveying the value of your product, or time savings for a candidate. Okay, well, that actually means the role sits open for fewer weeks, and the impact of this hired person on your business can start sooner, right? So,
Yeah.
I will just say that our customers have been asking for us to introduce ROI AI, excuse me, into Calendly. Not surprising because we are an automation company, and we actually just announced that we have AI powered scheduling solutions coming very, very soon, that I think
Cool.
are going to be just a continued game changer for already a product backed on automation
Yeah.
that's going to be, even more powerful.
Yeah. Let's play devil's advocate for a second. How
Okay,
we
let's
have a
do
little bit
it.
of fun, okay?
Yeah,
So we mentioned before we hit record, there's the famous Salesforce stat around, I don't even know what the most recent was, but it's somewhere around 25%. We could call it if a rep's time is actually spent selling.
yeah.
I feel like the time savings argument operates under the assumption that if reps had more time, they would use it on revenue generating
Mm,
activities.
mm,
So what do
yeah,
you think about that? I mean, there's obviously there at some point there's a diminishing return. There's only so much productive time that someone could spend in a day.
yep.
And what do you think about that argument, I guess? If we remove some of the stuff, will people actually spend it on revenue generating activities? Is it a one-to-one thing? If we remove 25% of the admin from a sales rep's day or a week and said you no longer have to forecast, you no longer have to do whatever the other stuff is that I don't even know a lot of
Yeah,
times
yeah,
what they're doing. And I guess another question I'm just going to kind of brain
yeah,
dump on you here
yeah.
is how accurate is the surveying, and do a lot of reps actually have that extra time in their schedule and they
Mhm.
choose either not to use it, or is this the way that, I mean, I imagine in a survey, if I have to admit that I don't spend that much time selling, it's kind of a easy thing to blame all of
Right.
the other stuff on. I don't know. What do you think of all of that? I'm not discrediting
No,
the fact that
totally.
there's not like tools obviously that do help sellers spend more time selling, but I don't know. That's where my mind kind of goes with that. It seems like a variable that we have very little control
Yep.
over. I don't know.
Well, I have a number of viewpoints. So one, I do think it connects back to the culture and the expectation in your sales org. So if we can give sellers more time back by taking these non-revenue generating tools off their plate, then we do need to have a conversation about what are we going to do with that time? What is the
Yeah.
expectation of how that time back is spent? And I think that there certainly is the goal and the idea that you are going to have more customer facing interactions. You are going to have more time to really research the ICP and spend a lot of time in this persona and just creating a lot of kind of personal credibility for when you are in front of customers, which I think would be a wonderful way to spend that time. Because again, I don't know that it has to be, I don't think we can say, I think it would be irresponsible to say that we're going to take a seller's production, let's use their OTE as baseline. And if right
Yeah.
now we want them to deliver 3x of their OTE, once we give them all these tools, now the expectation is 4 to 5x. I don't know that that's really the measure here, but I think of other measurements like what is the CSAT, the customer satisfaction, or
Mm,
what is your renewal rate, what is your NPS, your net promoter score. So if
yeah.
you are getting time back with your prospects and your buyers, then their experiences with you should be net positive and better than when you were kind of bogged down in dealing with scheduling, dealing with forecasting, and not having a revenue intelligence platform like a Gong or like a Clary. So yeah, I think we've got to be honest with ourselves about what we're going to do with that time. And I think the same is true for sales leaders.
Yep.
Let's talk about coaching and development. Let's talk about career pathing. Let's talk about the investment we're making to spend time with our people to help them be better than how we found them. Because I think that's such a
Yeah.
huge part of this job and our responsibility as well
Yeah.
as leaders.
Yeah. it's interesting. This is such a fascinating topic to me
Yeah.
because I really believe that AI and automation is gonna it seems to be trending more towards helping people do things themselves and to self-serve.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Sales managers, every sales manager like team that I work with of sales managers, they just don't spend very much time coaching because the
Mm,
common excuse is that they don't have time, but I kind of look at all the internal meetings they're asked to participate. I'm like, yeah, you really don't have a lot of time actually to coach.
right.
And a lot of the automation and the AI seems to be going towards how do we, you know, essentially help the rep self-diagnose and make it easier for them to do the right thing is where it kind of seems to be going. Where it's
Mm,
like it's not necessarily a time saver on the monotonous stuff. It's more let's help you make a better decision in less time. Like where I see a
yeah.
gong going is like what doesn't exist right now is you have all of this great data captured
Yeah.
and you can tell me all the deals I'm not where I'm single threaded on my team, right? My
Yep.
team's single
Yep.
threaded in these 20 deals out of 100. What it doesn't really tell you is what to do with that data. And I'm
Mm,
talking like the tactic. So, cool. Typically, in your deals, based on our analysis, a VP of sales is typically engaged. Have you thought about reaching out to Molly? We've already pulled her phone number and email. It's right here. By the way, here's sort of how we suggest reaching out to Molly. Um, that I feel like is right kind of in the grasp right now of what AI could do in the next couple years. Like that to me is like it's not so much a time saver as much as it's like, oh, that could increase the effective like that could say, hey, 40% of your deals are single threaded and now it's only 20%. That could have massive swing on win rates.
yeah.
And then the Calendly piece too, where it's like it can point out to you, hey, we noticed that when you've asked to schedule meetings with buyers in cycle, you're only getting the meeting like 35% of the time. Have you thought about like dropping a scheduling link into these emails? We don't see you doing that. Like I think it
Right.
needs to really get to that level for
Right.
us to really see an ROI off of it. I
Yeah. Because
opened
it's
kind of a whole can of worms now.
no, but it's no, it's
Yeah.
like the diagnosis, and
Mhm.
then there's the prescription. So it's kind of like we're
Yeah.
in this diagnosis, like, okay, here's what we know to be true, whether it
Yeah.
is, a no show for meetings or single threaded in deals. But I see what you're saying, which is like, okay, but what about this prescriptive element of what should I do now with this information? And I do
Yep.
think that this is where sales leaders, front line, second line, third line, have a really powerful role to help connect those dots for the team. When you and we are enormous fans of Gong. Calendly just announced our partnership with Gong, and I
Yeah.
think that they are so on the forefront for AI. They have a new Gong Engage product, and we're kind of coming from this shared belief that sales professionals can have the best of both worlds in scheduling automation and revenue intelligence, where you can do all of this in the Gong platform. Grab your Calendly link,
Yep.
understand kind of the open ops and the outbound prospecting you need to do in your deal cycle. But to your point, a sales leader still should be having deal review and pipeline review and taking that kind of diagnosis and saying,
Yeah.
now what are we going to do with this? And my job, by the way, is to kind of role play that with you. Let's talk through the scenarios. I'll be, the person on the receiving end, or hold the seller accountable to, we didn't do any of the stuff we said we were going to do, and like
Yeah.
that can't be the case. So I'm with you. I think also the very non sexy answer that I just feel like is the reality is, it is not only about how to get time back for sellers, but it's about, making the decision at the very top across the executive team of, how many people do we need to run the business as successfully and kind of profitably, because that's the goal of a business, as we can. And that's when I go back to sales and sales leaders saying, make yourself irreplaceable, make
Yep.
yourself so good and so high in value that you're not going to ever be in consideration of being able to be replaced. And that's not an easy thing to do, but I think, again, with the right culture, with the right coaching, and with the right mindset, it can be done.
Love it. And with that being said, I did a poor job of time management. We got to run
That's okay. That's
in about
okay.
30 seconds. Make sure to go check out Calendly at calendly.com. Molly McKinstry. Go check out her profile on LinkedIn. Connect with her. And is there anything else you want people to do, Molly, after
No,
listening to this
I
episode?
just thank you, Jason. Love the conversation. So interesting. And yeah, you already said it, but please find me on LinkedIn. Would love to connect. And if you are already not a Calendly user, you should change that. And we've got a lot of AI and really cool features coming. So check us out.